Back in a moment. Good morning, everyone. Today is May 17th, and I'm here with Caren, and we have a great conversation for everyone today. So thank you for joining us, and you may join later or tune in later, and we appreciate you pressing that replay button. I am Mary Ann Francis from Transforming Hearts PLLC, and here we have Caren. How are you doing today, Caren?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So here we continue on with May Mental Health Awareness Month, and we're talking about things outside of talk therapy because most people know about talk therapy, whether or not people like that method or not. There are other things that people can do in order to help themselves and grow, right? So I'm going to spend a moment to introduce Caren and what she does, and we'll begin our conversation. So Caren is a BCBA, which is a board certified behavior analyst, and an ADHD certified clinical service provider. She has over 20 years combined experience working in the school system as a certified educator and as an ADHD and executive function coach. Caren specializes in supporting adolescents and adults, providing parent support, and working with neurodivergent individuals as well as those in relationships with neurodivergent partners. Through the use of behavioral principles, acceptance and commitment therapy, and supportive accountability, individuals are met where they are with an individualized and compassionate approach to build skills and create lasting behavior change. I love it. And I think this is really different from some of the other guests that I had. And people do like an array of different things, right? So I'm glad to have you here today to talk about this because I really do think it's important for people to start understanding what other models there are, other techniques, and how it can be of use to them. So can you just introduce a little bit about what this means, right? Because that for some people there may be like, what? So just introduce a little bit about what this means to like neurodivergent, your BCBA, what do you do in the ADHD?
So I basically a BCBA is often like really held in the like autism world of like being in schools, being in clinics and that kind of thing, and working on an ABA, so applied behavior analysis. And behavior is obviously everything that we do. So it's really taking the BCBA kind of like specialization into another area. So what I do is I work with people a lot, mostly, honestly, have a diagnosis of ADHD. And especially for those people who are diagnosed later in life, they have a hard time kind of grappling with what they've been dealt with like throughout life, and also just their own thoughts and feelings and how to kind of navigate through the struggles that they're having. So what I do is we look at behavior. So we look at really what is truly going on for a person, and you can have ADHD or not, and focus on what people want to change and finding an approach that's really goal oriented. So there's like an action plan that can be evaluated, and you kind of see how it's going so that it's not feeling like there's no end in sight. You kind of like take those steps toward what you ultimately want to be changing. And we work on skill building and, really looking at what is working and what's not working so that we don't continue to do the things that aren't working for us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things that I used to work on in one of the facilities that I trained at, and I'm not a BCBA by any means, is working on understanding the function like
Mhm.
why certain behaviors, why we have certain behaviors, and what's the function to it. So is that part of that experience?
It is. It's really looking. I mean, sometimes we even think things aren't. I mean, in terms of even like struggling to start something or finish something, or like prioritizing those day to day things in terms of like executive function skills, and that's
Mhm.
part of what my focus is, which are the skills that we just do as humans, um, like decision making and like planning, prioritizing those sorts of things. But um, really looking at what's getting in the way and trying to identify, why is it that I'm not starting the thing that I've been, or like, why is it that I'll turn to this behavior instead of this other one, trying to really like peel back the layers like of an onion, really to like get to the center of, the reason behind things, which looks pretty different for people. And a lot of it
Yeah.
is those private behaviors that we have, like our thoughts and feelings, and um, trying to, help people to really verbalize that so that we can kind of get down to it and see where we're getting stuck.
Right, right. So where do you feel like it differs a little bit from talk therapy?
So we don't go backwards as much
Mhm.
necessarily, and I don't diagnose. Um, it's much more really looking at where a person is and where they want to go and looking at how to get there. So, um, history obviously is important, but it's not like I don't go back to necessarily like childhood and like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, but it's really looking at helping someone to see the actions that they can take, and in terms of like a little therapy connection really is the acceptance and commitment therapy that you had mentioned, and really looking at values and taking committed action toward our values. And a lot of times too, people don't necessarily know what's ultimately like important to them. They, we all come with like what our parents have said or what society says, and then we wonder why things aren't going the way we want them to, and it's that we really don't connect to those things. So really like trying to investigate what is of value to a person, and then taking again going forward, like, and having measurable steps along the way to see, are we getting there? If we're not, what's coming up for us to kind of prevent us from getting to where we want to be.
So this sounds like not necessarily like it has to pertain to uh, particular population,
Mm-hmm.
versus anybody can really find that to be handy even for themselves. Like, why am I getting stuck? And what are kind of my routine behaviors? And how do I kind of unbreak that habit in a sense, and, shift and do something different in order to be more productive?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, really, when even things, if someone's moving and they need to pack up a house, it's a very overwhelming task at hand. And a lot of times people don't know how to even really start that, or, from personal experience, the ever reaching, like, I want to lose weight or like start an exercise program, that kind of thing. And trying to really modify our environment to really suit our approach. And sometimes we just don't see the things that are like really in front of us, and it just helps to talk it through, to kind of like get it out there, get it on paper, um, and really like map out essentially like just the steps to getting us to what we want to do. And I mean, it could be things even um, in terms of like working with adolescents through adults. I mean, like people going to college and kind of like trying to figure out, how do I even make that decision on where to go? Or, if people are exploring new jobs, what are the steps I should be taking to do that? And um, yeah, so it's, as you said, it can be really for anyone.
Hmm. And something that you just said in my head popped up. Oh, so it's almost like creating and understanding what can be maybe more conducive, like even creating an environment that's conducive to that change pattern behavior, right? So if something wasn't functioning well, and this environment may not be, is like functioning for that habit, but it's not really working, it's creating maybe an environment as well that can be more conducive to the behavior change, the thing that you want to see to be more productive.
Right. And that's a lot of times where people will get stuck, is just kind of not even recognizing what can change. And I'll use something like, a calendar or planner. I mean, there are, any number of apps that people could use to like keep track of things or have paper and pencil planners. And a lot of times people will not utilize it effectively because it's just too much effort, or it's like to find the app, if you're not really technologically savvy or something, it might be difficult to pull that up regularly, or to learn how to actually use it as a part of then using it effectively. So there are steps where it's like taking a system and seeing, what are you doing now? What is the problem with that? And again, it's all very personal, very contextual. So as you said, like different things might work for just different aspects of life that don't work for others. And really trying to like get down to, trying this strategy out for a week and seeing, is it working? If it's not, then let's see what's not working about it. Maybe stick with the similar strategy and modify it, or try something, completely different.
I love that. Maybe that's why every month I choose a part of the house and I rearrange, organize things, because I'm like, this isn't working, not only for me, but it might be working for me, but it doesn't work for everybody else. So let me try to change it up to see if everybody else will follow that. So
right.
whether it's this or that, if they're every part of my house and they're like, oh, you're doing it again. Yes, I'm doing it because I need people to follow through with organizing.
Right. It's like trying to make it work for everyone. And I mean, that is such a real thing, where, I mean, like truly speaking of like organizing and just like laundry, I have a young kid, and, if I don't keep the laundry basket somewhere where he is going to see it, the dirty laundry is not going to end up in there. Like, I've learned that based on experience. So I need to restructure my environment to work for us. And it's truly like trying to figure out what's working until it's not working. But that's where the kind of like tracking part of what we do comes into play. So, it's funny you say about like focusing on different areas of your house. I mean, even in terms of like to-do lists for me, like I'll use like a certain notepad, and then all of a sudden, like I'm not using it anymore. And I'm thinking like, I need to come up with something else, so it's, figuring out, if the thing is no longer working, what about maybe our environment or our lifestyle, or, circumstances in general? What has changed that is now like affecting essentially like the like intervention that was put in place?
Yeah. Oh, I find that so interesting. And I guess in my head I'm just going back to even when I used to work with kids who had autism, and just again, I'm no BCBA, but um these were some of the things that I was trained in to do a little bit, and trying to understand how, on average, how long would it take for, I don't know, maybe there to be a functional system when it comes to one behavior change in your experience?
I mean, I think it differs. I mean, I think also looking at, um if if the behavior I want to change is like I want to make more healthy choices of like food or something like that, looking at it even in small pieces, where it's like one modification to then build on that and build on that and build on that. And I mean, it can go as long as sort of like a person wants it, what do they want it to look like? Like, I'm not the all knowing of like things for people. And, it has to be workable for every individual. So, if something isn't a problem for a person, then it's not something that I'm trying to then like change about their environment, that kind of thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'll work with people, some well over a year, and the focus can kind of like shift. And, in terms of executive function skills, um, there's overlap for sure amongst, the skills. And, if you're thinking about like when you're making a decision, I mean, there's all sorts of pieces that we're manipulating to figure out like options and the best approach to something. And some of those skills can obviously carry over to other areas. So, I mean, there's sometimes additional things come up that I think change when you say like a timeline of behavior change. I think it can be so, it's just varying and kind of
Yeah.
vast. But
Yeah. And very, very individualized.
yeah, and I think that it's, the term even like behavior change, it's so specific to
Yeah.
situations and to people. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, but it's interesting. I mean, it's very, a lot of times we, have those feelings that we go to talk therapy for, really, of like feeling that anxiety, or, maybe we have depression, or, we have guilt, shame, things like that come up. And some of those things, people will have a therapist that they work with, and then they'll come and work with me. And it really, there's overlap where our work can really like come together to help someone go to that next level. Um, so it's like
Yeah.
kind of going at it in all directions.
Yeah, I love that because a lot of times some clients do struggle with like the modification part is like shifting that and understanding like what is that function for you, like at this, how does, even what kind of feeling does it create when you are functioning in this way?
Right.
And if you're trying to shift it, and I, again, like I think I heard you say, basically like things are trial and error. We're going to try this one
Mm-hmm.
way and see if this shift feels better for you.
Right.
And what would you say to someone who is like, okay, I like that shift, but they're having a hard time maybe sticking with it?
So I think seeing where we can modify whatever that shift is
Mm-hmm.
to be more like accessible potentially, or sometimes it's also just taking a step back and seeing like, I started at this point where I wasn't doing it at all, and I'm not going to do a 180 to do it all the time, knowing that it isn't this linear progression too, where there's going to, we all have setbacks, and that's completely normal. And I think sometimes when we start off on a new venture, a new path, we feel like it can be very all or nothing. And I think sometimes that perspective shift too, where it's okay to have setbacks and we can learn from them. And I think just being more aware of what's coming up for us, and, really taking that time to stop and reflect and have some self-compassion too, where it's okay. It doesn't mean the whole system needs to be thrown out the window, where it might just be like, let's look at, even if you had a calendar and I did this one thing, you know, 12 times so far and I skipped 2 days of it or something, it's so easy to focus on those 2 days that we missed or something like that, and not look at all of those like checked boxes of I did
Right.
it.
Yeah.
So trying to see the big picture at times can be helpful.
Yeah, and I think I think that has a lot to say too in regards to like sometimes we might fall back into old patterns because it's like, oh, I messed up this one day. And it's just like, ah, I might as well go back because now I'm like really feeling in the dumps about it. And it's almost how like even emotionally, if we have 20 positive things that were said to us or compliments that we had, and there's this one negative thing about that, and it just like feels like it ruins the whole entire day. And then you're like sulking in that emotion,
Right.
and it's like not allowing that to get the best of you and say, but you had 20 compliments for the day, like why did that
Right.
one thing throw your whole stuff off track? And next few days, you're like going against that emotion versus the feel good.
Right. I know it's such a common pattern. I think that
Mhm.
we all can probably relate to at some level. And I think part of it really is recognizing that and slowly starting to see, like, I think sometimes we're so into our own things that
Mhm.
we don't even recognize that those thoughts are getting in the way of us
Mhm.
continuing on. And, um, realizing that they're not facts, they're just our thoughts, and that we can kind of separate from them, um, and still take action in spite of them. And, going back to, you said something too that made me think of this, but that it's not always going to be comfortable. Change is hard.
Mhm.
And that's why we try to approach it in steps where it's not like, you know, everything needs to change at once, but knowing that there are steps to the ultimate goal of what someone might want, can hopefully, help with a little bit of that discomfort, but also recognizing that it's okay to feel certain ways,
Yeah.
and it's natural as human beings, and we're going to have those doubts, that maybe it won't work or something like that. And that's okay to feel that. And I think sometimes the more we try to fight it, it could prevent us from, really taking action, thinking about like functions of behavior.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with that. It's about understanding that it does take time. And we're so used to things nowadays. Before we jumped on, we were talking about technology and the constant change of it.
Mm-hmm.
And but we're so used to like instant gratification in this world, because of technology. Like
Yeah.
if I can order something on Amazon, comes tomorrow, I'm like, yes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, people don't really have to wait for a lot of things. And it's almost like the impatience tolerance has really gotten smaller because we're
Mm-hmm.
so used to other things gratifying us so instantaneous now. And so understanding that if you want to shift, whether that's emotionally or even something behaviorally, it takes time, and practicing and having that patience is so imperative to be able to say, hey, this actually takes time. Like,
Mm-hmm.
stick with it and don't get bogged down by the emotion of it not working fast enough.
Yeah.
um, because the saying is still true to this day, is that all good things take time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the struggle is real. I mean, we really to, have to wait for that like reward or that
Mhm.
feeling like we've accomplished something is so difficult.
Mhm.
And I think, that goes into really the way goals are structured. And, a lot of people don't like the word goal, but like action plans are structured. So that we can see even like the wins along the way, that we're not, it's really it, when people say life is a journey, like it really is the journey of getting somewhere. And I always like to use the term recalibrate. I mean, we're just truly like recalibrating as we go, and that's a part of it. But trying to highlight those times when we've hit a certain point, and let's celebrate that, and making those points as, show up as quick as we maybe need them. And that looks different for everyone too.
Right.
um, but really also not being afraid to look for little rewards along the way that we can give ourselves. I think sometimes as adults, it's, it might seem funny or, even
Right.
difficult to kind of identify what's rewarding, but yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. Because I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because I think oftentimes, like, say for instance, let's say for instance budgeting, right? Because budgeting tends to be always a big topic, financing. And I think oftentimes, and I only bring this up because I think oftentimes people try to be so frugal and so strict, and they don't feel like they can reward themselves. But it's like the little things, is it that you don't have to get yourself something huge. Is this something that could be very simple? There's times where, especially in the summertime, When if I'm going outside, I'm like, oh, I'm going to weed my flowers today, and whatever it is, I'm going to spend some time in the yard, and I really don't want to, but I'm going to. I'll reward myself with ice cream after. I'm that way where I love ice cream. So at night is like I tell my daughter, you want to go to DQ, and she's like, did you have to ask? And we're like heading to DQ, and for me, that's my little reward to myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you add in like the reward system when you did something good?
I think it's very individualized, for you, again, ice cream. And I think having it where it's like, enticing the kid to want to go, that helps. But I mean, it might be something like if someone enjoys reading, going to the library doesn't cost anything. Get a book out from the library, sit somewhere you enjoy. I mean, maybe, walking along, the beach or, in the woods, taking a bath, just different things. Maybe it's, allowing yourself like time to sleep in or going to bed later if, you're often structured in that way. So trying to, I think, those sorts of things that we enjoy, though it may not seem so like obvious all the time, it might just take a moment to kind of like stop and think what what do I enjoy? Like you're not always so aware of it, even though in other ways it seems like obvious, like, oh yeah, of course I enjoy like drinking coffee, like going and getting a cup of coffee to me would be rewarding. Maybe even just going out with friends or something like that. So really trying to see what matters, in that kind of particular moment, I guess. And knowing that changes too. I think that that's important to recognize that our preferences constantly change and going with that. But I think also, going back to like that rigidity of, budgeting and maybe not feeling like we can spend something, looking at other ways to just intermingle. And I mean, honestly, like even looking up different ways or cheap ways or free ways to reward ourselves, and there's even different things that, if people enjoy like nature or whatever, I'm sure there's like different locations that people can seek out and go and spend some time at and stuff. So I think sometimes it takes a little creativity, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah. So are there any maybe like tips with people who are trying to maybe begin or start to change a certain behavior? Anything that you would tell people to start with?
So I would say really thinking about like what is the problem in terms of what's going on now. So like, I don't know if it's like going to the gym more or something. Like what is the problem with what you're doing now, to be specific about how to structure it toward what you really want to be doing. And then I think really outlining steps that truly are realistic. I think sometimes too what we get probably caught up in a little bit is just how much time we think we have in a day, and even really like stepping back and looking at like if you have a goal for the week, is it truly realistic with the time that you have available to spend on whatever it might be? And again, there's obviously a variety of things we can be working on, but really trying to be realistic and taking things in small doses, and really like when I say track it, like not coming up with some crazy system, but just really keeping an eye out of like, how do we know if it's actually working or not? So that you can, if it's not, you're not spending a month doing something repeatedly. Like you can really catch it earlier on to modify it to work for you.
Yeah. So they say that 30 days creates a new habit, right? Would you wait that long to see if it's not working for you?
I wouldn't. I would say, I think ultimately, like if there's a habit, there are steps to building it. So I think breaking down like that larger habit or behavior
Mhm.
that we want to be doing, um, having it broken down into smaller steps will just allow us to see it before that like 30-day
Mm,
mark, kind of, if that makes sense.
yeah, like if it's working, then you'll notice it and you'll see it versus if it's not working, even within a week's time frame or a few days, you're not liking how it feels, then that's something that you should switch up.
Right. And yeah, if it's not getting you even to where you want to be, because we
Yeah.
might not always like how it feels, but
Yeah.
it might be toward the greater good, a little discomfort in
Right.
the short term for the bigger picture, maybe.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think being able to really catch it sooner than later, so that we can really continue on the path too of where we want to head. Um, yeah, it's important.
Oh, okay. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience?
I would like to share just a few groups that we have coming up. So I actually work for a company out of Chicago. And so the timing I'm going to give in Eastern time, but we have a few webinar or a couple webinars. One is adults and ADHD, and that's understanding adult ADHD and using effective strategies. And that one is on Monday, June 3rd at 7 p.m. Then I have parenting children with ADHD, and that's about building up a toolkit, and that is on Tuesday, June 4th at 7:30 p.m. And then I also do some groups, and they are skill based groups focused on executive function, skill building, and behavior change. And we have a new group that those are for adults starting June 3rd, and that is for 10 weeks. And that one's going to meet Mondays and Wednesdays from 12 to 1. And then there is 1 week that we're not meeting because of a vacation. But guidingbehavior.com, Guiding Behavior PLLC is the company, and that's the website. So you can access those specifics there as well.
And that's guidingbehavior.com.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So for the audience, I did put some of those resources on the chat so you guys can look, as well as the website as well, so you guys can tune into that. So they can find you on the website, guidingbehavior.com. Do you have a social media platforms at all?
I do not specifically there is a guiding behavior on
Okay,
Facebook.
just in general.
Yeah, guiding behavior counseling, but yeah, I don't
Okay.
have the two.
But they can go to the website and see these groups.
Yes, and my email is on there as well if you want to just reach out with questions. Happy to help.
Great, Caren, thank you so much. I think the conversation today was very informative for myself, and I hope for the audience as well. And just knowing that, again, like things take time, and so if you want to be able to change or understand some of these behaviors, Caren would be a great resource for you to go to, and she can help you with that. And again, like patience is truly a virtue when it comes to a lot of these things, but it can be done. So it's just about giving yourself the self-compassion that is going to take in order to step by step take the steps that you need to in order to see a change even for yourself. So I love that. But any ending remarks at this time?
I don't think so. Just, yeah, thank you. I appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah, not a problem. Thank you guys all for tuning in. And if you're hitting that replay button, thank you for viewing this today on skill based treatment support. And we will check in with you guys next week for more lives. This is Mary Ann Francis from Transforming Hearts, PLLC.